Hello, I'm Parker,
Hi, I'm Hayley.
and welcome to Authors and Auteurs.
In this episode, we will be discussing and analyzing Citizen Kane.
So we're going to be talking about Citizen Kane, which I think you just finished watching, like, just now, right?
Yeah, about
Just
like
now?
5 minutes ago.
And what did you think?
The first half is very slow.
Yeah, it is. I guess so. I mean, it's not a very fast-paced movie at all.
Yeah.
Any part of it, except for like the opera part. That's like the fastest part of the whole movie, weirdly enough.
Yeah, the second half had my attention like the whole time. I was very, very into it. Everything's starting to connect and you're starting to understand what's happening a little bit more. That was the other problem that I kind of had with it is it's not easy to understand. Like, it's not... Like, you need to think about it to get the message. Before I started watching, you were like, you should treat this like an English assignment. And I was like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, you should.
What did you think of the ending, though? What did you think of that?
I was thinking about the ending, and spoiler, but there's the, what is it? Is it like a sled that has the word rosebud on it? And this might be dumb, but like Charles Kane was like an overachiever. You know, he was always like striving to do good and like be wealthy and all that stuff, right? Yeah. And the thing that it's implied he cared about a lot or cared about the most is like Rosebud, I guess. And that is just getting burned.
From what I could tell, it's like it's not that he cared about that sled more than anything. It's just that moment when he was. It's referring to when he was using the sled as a kid, like just kind of playing in his front yard, right before he was given all that money and taken to, I think, New York, by that guy whose name I can't remember, the rich guy. So it's like his childhood before he was introduced to the real world, like everything kind of came crashing down for him after that because he a lot of the movie doesn't agree with itself in interesting ways because it's all these different people telling the story. So it's like at one point they're singing like from wealth and even though he has wealth and fame, he's still the same. Like from when he was a little kid, he had always been rich except before that point. So like I think it's supposed to say that even, maybe in a subconscious way, he always kind of wanted to go back to that, but was never able to. But that's not what the movie explores at all. The movie just explores how sad his life was. Like, how none of this stuff ever did anything for him.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
The sled has like a lot of symbolism in the movie, I feel like. Because
it does, definitely.
Definitely, I personally think it like represents his innocence, right? Or his childhood.
I think so,
For sure.
yeah.
But also when it gets burned after he's died, I feel like that represents like human mortality and how you can do so well, but like what's that worth in the afterlife?
Yeah.
You know?
And the fact that he kept do you remember at the very end, they have that stove? Like, they're like, this stove is worth $2 and this statue is worth like $1 million. The stove was from his house. You see it in his house, like
right,
his childhood home. Yeah. So he didn't just keep the sled. He kept a whole bunch of stuff, but the sled was what he remembered the name of. Now, I don't remember if that was the sled. Was that the one he was playing on, or was that the one that the rich guy gave him after he moved because he wanted him to feel like he was at home? I don't know. Maybe we're not supposed to know which one it is, but I would guess it's the one he had as a little kid because it kind of aligns with the symbolism. Oh, you know what's interesting about that, actually, is that it's such an iconic piece of cinema history, but it was burned on camera. Like, the actual sled is gone. So think of how much that would be worth today. And another interesting thing is at the very first moments of the movie, he has that snow globe and it shatters on the floor.
Right, yes.
So any hope of him returning to that innocent childhood place just ends at the very beginning of the movie. Like,
right.
you don't know what it means at that point, but it's gone. And the shot of the nurse coming in with the through the glass where it's all warped could be his warped perspective on life. I don't know. That's
Oh.
very English analysis-y, but I think that could be it. There's more moments like
Right.
that where later and he's walking down the hallway and there's those mirrors that just go on forever.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be him reflecting on himself.
Oh, nice
And
job.
and he sees no point in anything. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Round of applause. Thank goodness. No, but
What do you
yeah,
think?
I mean,
Citizen Kane was released a year after the United States entered World War II. So it was not
yeah.
people weren't looking for a critique of American society at that time because it was like wartime.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's funny.
Yeah.
Um,
But then again, it got banned in some countries for being too communist, and then it got banned in the Soviet Union for being too positive on capitalism. So that's pretty fun.
that is interesting. Yeah. Um, Orson Welles has like a way of like filming this thing, where I was talking about this earlier, how when there's two people talking and somebody stops talking, he still focuses on the person who isn't talking anymore in the conversation. Like when the detective is trying to figure out what Rosebud means, he is always filming the other person. And I am thinking about this, and I'm wondering what you think about it, but I feel like it's also trying to make the viewers feel like the detective and trying to like make them want to find out.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, you're seeing the film from the perspective of the reporter hearing all these stories. So you don't even know who Charles Kane was.
Right.
You just know who he was to them.
Mm-hmm.
So we do get some moments where he seemed like he was by himself, but other people were nearby and could hear him. But there aren't really any moments in that movie where he's completely by himself for very long at all, which I never really thought about before. But the only time I can think of where he's completely by himself is right before he meets Susan Alexander, the lady with the toothache, like on the side of the road, and he's waiting for a taxi. But other than that, there's like no moment where he's by himself. All the times he's at his house, seemingly alone. The butler is nearby, and then all the times that he's like throughout childhood and growing up, it's his college friend, his coworkers, and that one rich guy whose name I should probably know. He was always lonely, but he was never by himself, and yet he didn't care. Like the clearest message of that movie is he wanted everybody's love and attention, and never felt like he got it, and so that made him very unhappy because he was obsessed with himself. But Rosebud is right before he becomes obsessed with himself, where he's just not caring about anything. So
Yeah. I know you. What did you just say? The message was that he wanted love and attention from everybody?
For
Yeah.
sure. That's why he
But-
ran for, that's why he had a newspaper. That's why he ran for president. That's why he did all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's why he got married.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
wanted love and attention from everybody, but he also couldn't give love or attention to anybody.
Exactly.
So that's
Because all he cared
interesting.
about was himself.
Right.
Yeah. Like this movie is kind of built around creating a contrast between how he wants the world to see him and how he acts.
Right.
So he's acting like he is the center of the world, and then he's shocked that people might not think that. But he doesn't even encounter that much resistance to the idea that he's the center of the world. Everyone just goes along with it.
Right. That's so interesting.
Until his second wife walks out on him, because that's the only time he doesn't have control over everything, or he doesn't feel like he has control over everything.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah,
think
he definitely needs control. Like, he needs to feel like he's in control.
yes,
That's also
definitely.
something. like a
What
major part of his character.
What was your reaction to kind of the visual style of the movie?
Okay, when I was first watching it, like the first 10, 15 minutes, I was like, something about this feels so amateur. And I don't know why that came to my mind, but there was something about it that seemed not tacky, but like, I haven't seen this before. Like, this is
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah,
That's very fitting with the situation that it was made in because he had never made a movie before then.
right.
Yeah, so he was he was completely new. He was totally amateur as a director, but he had been acting for a long time. All the people in that movie were part of the same theater troupe.
Oh, really?
That yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
So like at the end of the movie, the way it does the credits is kind of weird because like they didn't know how they were supposed to do the credits.
Oh, yeah.
And and he's like trying to introduce all his friends into Hollywood so they can be movie stars.
Right,
Um,
yes.
but I don't know if any of them actually made it big. But you do kind of get the feeling that they're not part of the same group. They do feel like very separate people in the movie, I guess. That
Hmm.
might be maybe like tried really hard to do that because I would have never guessed they were all part of the same group. I would have guessed that they pulled them from all over the place. I have no idea why I brought that up. I think you were saying how it felt amateurish.
Right, yeah.
I don't know. I think maybe I mean nowadays it would be seen as kind of a tacky movie because it obviously is very much it's kind of self-indulgent with the way it does things because it's like expecting you as a movie might expect of you to pay attention and notice all these little things to actually understand the story itself. So if it didn't feel like it earned that from you in the first part of the movie, I can see how that would be like, why does it feel like I should know this? Why is it telling me this?
I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
eventually, like, in my opinion, it
It
got
it clicks,
a lot
yeah.
better. And everything seemed more intentional, but I don't know if that was like him being like, oh, I got this figured out now. Like, oh, I can do this. Or if
He was
I
learning
started to understand what he was trying to do.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't think we can know.
True.
But
Oh, you can.
I'm curious, like, since you just finished watching the movie, I want to kind of explore more of your raw interpretation without any really time for reflection right after it. What do you think the relationship between him and his friend meant? That guy who wrote a bad review of his second wife. Because with the principles of journalism that he wrote out, and he mailed them back with the shredded check. What do you think
Mhm.
of all that?
I felt this is probably not right, but I kind of felt like a sense of betrayal almost, or something like he just
Hmm.
wasn't like expecting it. I don't know. Like some, it
I
seemed
don't think he
more
was
like,
expecting it.
or like not necessarily that, like he like just didn't think that that would be something that he would do. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your
I
thoughts?
think that I can see how that would feel like betrayal because it kind of was in a way because he's like his friend wrote a bad review about his wife and that's his newspaper and all the other newspapers he actually bribed or they're trying to get on his good side by writing a good review about the bad performance. But then he wants to prove a point with those like journalism ethics that he wrote out. I forget what he wrote out, but it was like I remember him holding his friend holding it up and saying like I have a feeling this is going to be an important document someday, like the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. And it is interesting because it kind of was a Declaration of Independence because his fake dad, the guy who adopted him and gave him all that money, didn't want him to run this newspaper. So writing out his plan for the newspaper is a lot like a Declaration of Independence. But then him going back on it later, on those principles, is like him tethering himself to that life he promised he would never have because he wanted to be the good guy. And then now they're saying things like he didn't win the election, so it says fraud at the polls. So he wants to prove to his friend that he still kind of cares about those ethics, but then he really doesn't. So his friend, he fires him. I feel bad because I can't remember any of their names. His friend. He fires him, and then he has to leave because he's fired. And he sends him money because you do that when you fire people. But then he sends the money back, all cut up, with the letter right when his wife is leaving him. So he's losing like twice as much as it might seem like he's losing, because his wife is leaving, but his friend is saying you've completely become the opposite of what you wanted to be when you were a kid. So yeah, I feel like all my analysis of this like contradicts itself, because it is a confusing movie.
Yeah, it's confusing, and I feel like there kind of are parts that contradict itself in the movie. Like, I'm a little...
Well,
like,
it's all different people telling it, so he found a way to make it fit if there are contradictions.
Yeah.
He found a way to have... he doesn't have to pay so much attention to continuity as he does the story itself, because it's all different people telling it.
Okay, that was smart of him, because that
Yep.
really removes a lot of room for plot holes.
Definitely.
But
Because, I mean, what do you remember about something? It's just what you remember. Like, so... And I love some of the transitions in that movie.
yes.
That one part where it zooms in on the picture in the window, and then he walks into frame.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I forgot to write a little note about that. But yes, I was like, I rewatched it again because I was like, wait, what just happened? That was so cool.
It's seamless. It's perfect.
It's perfect.
It gave me chills the first time I watched it, because the way he walks in, and I don't know, something about the tone of his voice, but he's like, 2 years ago I saw a picture in a window, and it said, "The best journalists alive." Well, now something about he made some metaphor about being a kid in a candy store or something. I don't know. And then he just goes, "Welcome, gentlemen, to the Enquirer," and then the photo snaps, and then like the lights flash, and it cuts to the next thing.
Yes.
I don't know. I just love that scene.
So cool. That was so neat.
I think that's where he peaks as a person. That's like the last time you see him really happy.
Yeah.
And then everything else is like bad.
Yeah.
Because he's gotten the journalism staff that he wants, so he's already reached pretty much as far as he planned. And then they have that weird party scene, which is always like...
That was the most awkward like conversation ever.
It was so weird. I think it's supposed to feel that way though, because it's like, this isn't right. Something's wrong with all this. Like, this does not feel right. And then they sing that song about him, and he dances with all the dancers, and it's like weird. And then because he's so obsessed with himself that he doesn't notice how weird anything is. Yeah. Then they have that big ice K. Just because.
Mm-hmm. Just because they can.
There. And then he goes on vacation, and when he comes back, they present him a large trophy for having come back from vacation.
Yeah.
It's like, welcome back. Here's a trophy.
I remember what I was going to ask you. What symbolic value do you think the statues hold? Because he's like kind of obsessed with statues.
I think that the statues are two things. I think it's him trying to get a status symbol of like, look at all this wealth and achievement that I have, and trying to become a part of history. But I think it's also a symbol for how he's become just a statue and not really like a person, just kind of a symbol and a character that doesn't seem real. And that he surrounds himself with statues and not real people is also significant, because he's lost all sense of what's real. So it's just pretend and lifeless. It's a very encouraging movie.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I agree with a lot of what you said, but I also think the statues correlate with his need to control, because a lot of the statues are like of people, right? And like Like he can control, like he has control over the statues, they're not
Yes.
moving. They're, you know.
Yes. The Lego movie is
That's funny.
it's just Citizen Kane. It's the same thing. It's the same story. Will
my
Ferrell
gosh.
plays Citizen Kane in
Sponsored
ambitious
by Lego.
reboot. Sponsored by
That's
Lego. That is kind of interesting to think about though, because on the first glance, the Lego movie looks a lot like The Matrix, but on a second glance, it could look a lot like
funny.
Citizen Kane. And oh my goodness, it kind of does though, because like there's a part where Lord Business says, and because he's got the micromanagers to make everything just the way he wants it, and the way that he says that is something like. Everything will be exactly as I want it to be. No one will be able to mess it up. Something like that. The way he says it sounds a lot like the way Charles Foster Kane says, people will think what I tell them to think, which is a direct quote from, or not a direct quote, it's paraphrasing William Hearst at some points, because there's another point where he says, you provide the poems, I provide the war, where he is making up a story about a war in Cuba when there isn't one yet, but there's tension, and then he wants poems for it for some reason. I think he mostly did that just because he didn't want it to be the actual quote, which is, you provide the pictures, I'll provide the war. Like, William Randolph Hearst actually said that about I don't remember what country it was, but there was a lot of tension between the United States and another country, and he basically invented that whole
Interesting.
war, and it kind of ended up happening, but not really. But the public thought it did. Yeah. Another thing that's kind of interesting to think about is, before Orson Welles did this, he did a broadcast of a classic book called War of the Worlds,
Oh my gosh.
like a radio broadcast of it, just like what we're doing right now, audio only. Anyway, he made it seem like this science fiction book was a news broadcast. But he tells the audience a few times during the broadcast that it's not real. And then, of course, the newspapers reported that people
Yikes.
went crazy listening to it, that people committed suicide thinking that aliens were coming to Earth. And the interesting thing is, that seemed to be partially or completely invented by the newspapers to sell newspapers, and potentially to make people distrust radio, which was kind of why he was doing this, because he's like, there's a quote from Orson Welles where he says that people, when they read the newspaper, they think critically about it, and they don't believe everything because they're used to knowing that like people write this and their opinions are part of it. But radio seemed to be a new threat to people just listening and then adopting all of those ideas as their own, because they weren't really thinking critically about it, just because it was such a new technology and format that they weren't used to being lied to through. So he kind of wanted to exploit that in showing people that they shouldn't really believe everything on there. But then the newspapers convinced people still to this day, and we don't know to what degree, that was a huge crisis. So he made up a pretend crisis, read it over the radio adapted from an old book. It was reported as an actual real crisis that probably wasn't to that scale, at least, that the newspapers reported, and then people believed it. So whichever way you look at it, it partially emulates the message of Citizen Kane, because he's trying to control people and how they view him through newspapers sometimes, through himself, just how he acts in other times.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
It's interesting because it connects to Orson Welles'
How you were
actual
saying,
life.
Charles Kane, he needs to be in control, and he runs all of these newspapers, and he filters and controls everything that the society knows about what's happening in the world, in their city, and wherever, pretty much.
Yep.
Whatever's in that newspaper is what they know, and he has control over everybody. If he can control the news, basically, or what they know, it's like, I was thinking he would be like Mark Zuckerberg. Like he was just like he'd own like every single social media platform. And
Yeah, pretty much.
hmm
The only reason he didn't get elected was because of that scandal, but because he was able to so completely control the public's opinion of him until that point. So, yeah, you're right. And William Hearst actually was that. He had that chain of newspapers in real life
mm,
from New York to San Francisco, or the opposite of that, because he started in San Francisco. But yeah, he pretty much controlled public opinion until some
oh,
scandal broke. I don't know if there was a scandal in real life or if that was a plot device for the movie, but it's compelling because like he's not able to
it's
control
true.
what his political opponent says about him, and what his political opponent says about him will be reported. So
Interesting.
that's how he gets destroyed, politically at least. It's a hard movie to review because it's confusing and important and good and all at the same time. I mean, it has that feeling of like this feels important. Like you understand that the things that he did for that movie had never been done before. And according to him, that was because he had no idea how to make a movie and just tried whatever he could think of, which I think that's hilarious because there's a quote from him. I quote a lot, I guess, but I remember him saying this, which is um, someone asked him how he got ideas for Citizen Kane, and he said,
It's funny.
"Ignorance, pure
Do you
ignorance. There's
think
no authority in the world
do
like
you
it."
think that Orson Welles really meant that, or was he just trying to make it seem like he had no experience going into this, and then all of a sudden he like put this thing together, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know how I did that."
He definitely had no experience going into it. As you can, there actually are some technical mistakes in the movie itself. For example, there's one scene where so he oversaw the editing of the whole movie. I'm gonna ruin this little part of the movie for you. I'll no, I'll tell you that after the review because I want to
Okay.
hear your opinion on it.
The technical aspect's not going to change my review, but
Oh, okay. Well, it was like when he's shouting at Jim Geddes as he's leaving the house. There's a part where it's a close up of him while you hear him shouting, but his lips aren't moving.
mm,
So they mismatched the audio and visual, and
oh,
it was so hard to edit things back then. That's such a small mistake. It's a miracle that they didn't have problems everywhere because he had no idea what he was doing. But yeah, that definitely makes that scene a little bit less compelling to me.
those kinds of minuscule mistakes don't really bother me because I can't tell if it's like my phone or my TV or if that, because sometimes it's off and it's just like not their fault.
Hmm.
Um, but I rate movies like out of 10, and I would say for me, like just right off the bat, this is like a raw review. I give it
Okay.
8 out of 10. Yeah.
Wow, really? Wait, I was like bracing for a 3 or a 4.
Oh,
Why on
what?
earth did you
Really?
give it an 8? Yeah, yeah, I'm curious because
Wait, why
the
did you
entertainment
think?
value. Well, I thought you were going to rate it really low because it's a difficult movie, I think, to be entertained by if you're not interested or engaged in the mystery of it.
Right. Yeah.
So, explain
Okay.
your rating,
Yes.
please, because it does surprise me.
I okay. You tend to watch movies from a more objective point of view, and you are like critical about it in a good way. Not in like, oh, you're so like critical. But I tend to watch movies from like a viewer or an audience's point of view, and I'm like more rating it on how much I enjoyed it. But that has been changing. That has been changing,
Interesting.
and I
I
can.
actually think it's better to see it from an audience perspective because that's all that really matters, I think.
I feel like yes, but I feel like you also need both because there are some elements in Citizen Kane, like the symbolism of the sled, that if you were just watching
Mm-hmm.
that from an audience perspective, I don't know if you would understand like how cool that is or how like whoa.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I
okay.
think it's good to have both. But okay, what bothers me the most, I feel like, is the overall pace of the movie. The first
Okay.
half, mm, I don't know. That was a little like hard for me to get through. I was like, why is this the best movie of all time? But now, after watching the whole thing and seeing how everything connected, I understand that, and I am in awe of Citizen Kane now.
What causes you to be in awe? What specifically?
Most, like 50%, no, like 50, 70, no, 75% of that is because of the sled.
Why? What do you mean? What about the sled?
Just how much it symbolized, like how significant it was, and it's just like a piece of wood.
Exactly.
And it got
how
burned
vague,
anyways.
and how vague the story can be about what it actually means, because there's so much it could actually mean.
Right.
Like, there's from what I can tell, there's some debate about what it actually is supposed to symbolize. I mean, it very clearly is referencing his childhood in some way, but what does that actually mean for the story is what the question is, and you're not really supposed to know from the movie. I think you're supposed to get, like abstract art in a way, I guess. Yeah. So you give it an 8 out of 10. Wow. Actually, people tried to colorize Citizen Kane, and Orson Welles shut them down so fast.
Oh, thank goodness.
He said something like there's some, I don't remember what, I think it was the Ted Turner Network that was trying to colorize movies, and he told him to keep his crayons away from Citizen Kane.
That's funny.
And yeah, he there's like 2 shots from the colorized Citizen Kane. They colorized the whole thing and then got in trouble for it, and no one has ever seen it. So that's kind of interesting. I feel like I say that a lot. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, what was it? I was going to talk about what I thought of the movie.
Out of 10.
Artistically, I'd say it's very, very good. From an entertainment perspective, purely on how much I was able to engage with the story, I wouldn't say it's the most engaging film from a character or entertainment perspective, because it's just so depressing. Like, I mean, at a certain point, you realize that's all this is really going to be. It's just how sad his life is and how much he lost, which is hard to tell because, like, how much did he really lose? Like, he didn't live that hard of a life from a historical perspective. Like, people have, like, his challenges are just kind of emotional. But that's what the movie's about. I'd give it, as a movie, purely looking at it from entertainment, I'd give it only a 6.5 out of 10. But from an artistic perspective, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. So, kind of, I don't know how to mathematically average that off the top of my head, but I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 as well. So, we agree on that.
An 8 out of 10.
I am surprised by.
An 8 out of 10 is a B, so it's pretty good. You should watch
Oh,
it.
no, maybe I mean a 9 out of 10, because I don't want to give Citizen Kane a B. That's not okay.
A B is good. A B is above average.
I'm giving it an A. I'm putting it up to 9 out of 10, because it needs to have an A, because that's Citizen Kane.
Okay.
9
Okay,
out of 10.
9 out of 10.
I need to change
9
that.
out of 10. Average, 8.5. 8.5 still a B.
Fine. Fine. Have it your way. B plus for Citizen Kane.
Yes.
Or no, just a B. No, that's just a B.
Well.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it is, huh?
A dagger in my heart.
I wouldn't know. I'm just kidding. No, but that's a joke. I'm not like that. Okay.
You need to clarify that.
Yeah, just so like they're not like, oh, she's so annoying, swipe or whatever. I don't know.
I can't stand Hayley. Unbelievable.
So yeah, 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up indeed. Everyone should see Citizen Kane, as long as they're not going to be too depressed by it, because it's not an encouraging film at all. That's the number one thing that I don't. I understand the artistic merit of making something really sad and moody, but I don't enjoy it.
Interesting.
I enjoy I enjoy drama, and I enjoy how dramatic it is, but I prefer for there to be some kind of message of hope in a film, because I think that's a lot more valuable than making people feel like, oh, I guess life is just meaningless and sad.
I agree with that. I can see where you're coming from.
That's why my favorite movie is It's a Wonderful Life, because it does have that.
Okay, yeah. Now it's all adding up, because I When I watched It's a Wonderful Life, I was not exactly a fan.
Citizen Kane is kind of weirdly paced because of the way the story is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it directly follows screenwriting convention with like setup, catalyst, and then like that kind of arc. It definitely follows it loosely, but the way that it scatters around the story just a little bit kind of gives it a different quality, which is difficult to describe. But it definitely makes it feel very different from any other movie ever.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Yeah.
That I've seen.
Yeah.
So like, I forget what it was, but just kind of. I mean, how many movies start with the protagonist dying?
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, when you are watching it, you do feel like the reporter.
Yes.
Yes. Wait, okay, do we ever see the reporter's face?
I think one time when he calls on the phone at the very beginning. When he steps into the phone booth at former Mrs. Kane's like little diner or whatever that is.
Are you sure? Because I feel like it's like... Because now that I think about it, I don't think we ever see his face. We only see like parts of him.
Because at the very beginning, it's like a dark room, right? Because it's all these shadows of reporters talking. And so only parts of them are illuminated. But I do think that I would prefer to be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that we see him at the beginning kind of by... right after Mrs. Alexander refuses to be interviewed.
Mm.
No, we don't ever see the reporter's face. You're completely right. Because when he steps into the phone booth, it's all dark, and you don't see him.
Oh, that is so neat.
I think maybe at the very end you see his face. I just want to be sure. No, you don't, because he's facing away from the camera, and there's no lights. That is awesome.
That is so cool.
Okay, that is really cool. So he's actually, you're totally right, because the audience is supposed to be him. So if you give him a face, then people might not connect as much because it's just a symbol of like the audience. Yes.
That is so cool on Orson Welles' part. That very, very neat.
Well,
good
two
job.
Thumbs up for Hayley for noticing that, because I did not notice that at all.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, that is so cool. Actually, how many movies do that? Like where you don't see the perspective. Because it's all from the perspective of the reporter. You only know what he knows. Because he's you. He is the audience.
Mm-hmm.
That is really, really neat.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? That's a 9.5 out of 10.
I know. I was just thinking. I feel like my rating has gone up a little. Yeah, I would... Yeah, 8.5. 8.5.
I mean, that's the mark of a good movie, though, because the more you think about it, the better it gets.
Yeah.
Like, it holds up to any kind of criticism you give it. Even technical challenges don't break the world completely. Yeah.
Yeah, 9 out of 10. Oh my gosh. Wait, yeah, 9 out of 10.
Hooray, we've given it an A.
You got an A.
You
got an A, Citizen Kane. You got an A.
You gave the best film in history an A. You know, we're getting somewhere with this. Very good.
Well, no, now, okay, I feel like that goes this applies to books too. When you talk about them and you, like classics, if you talk about them and you understand them more, you like them more, you know?
Definitely.
This is kind of the same thing.
Like, it's like the difference between just glancing at a picture and then like staring at it, and you can appreciate all the little things in it. Because you look at it longer.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I didn't notice the reflections. Oh.
Thank you for tuning in. If you liked this episode, please follow us on Instagram at Authors and Auteurs. You can also please no. You can also Also, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content. You can listen to our future episodes on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.